You're listening to Intentionally Catholic, a podcast about living our Catholic faith with joy and intention.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'm Dan Hansen.
I'm Father Ron Hutchinson.
Now, Father, I want to talk today about something that I think every Christian probably wrestles with. How do we actually know God's will? Now, not big picture stuff. We all get that God calls us, to holiness, to love, to avoid sin. That's his will. We get that stuff. That part's clear. But what about the decisions, that we've got to make every day that aren't so clear? Things like marriage, careers, figuring out what in the world to do after college, which school to go to. These are decisions that they impact our families. They impact us, of course, our futures, possibly, a lot of them, even our eternity. But the problem is, we pray, we ask God to show us his will, but sometimes, at least for me, all I get is silence, and when I do feel something, it's often, kind of like a roller coaster. One day I'm thinking this has got to be God's plan. It's all clicking. And then the next day I feel, the exact opposite. And sometimes I wonder if that's God speaking or if I just need to eat something. Maybe it's just that. So that's the conversation I want to dig into today. And to get specific, rather than just throw a little, random ideas out there, let's get specific. I'm in the middle of discerning marriage. I don't think you're aware of that. It's kind of a new thing, but we
Thank you for shocking me.
So yeah, I'm doing that. It's exciting and it's absolutely terrifying. I don't want to get this wrong. So I'm praying novenas. I'm talking to people. I'm reading everything I can get my hands on. I'm praying one-on-one, asking God for guidance. But at the end of the day, it still sometimes feels like silence. And I know I'm not the only one because I've got a kid who's trying to discern what in the world to do after college, and he's stuck. He's been praying and listening for years, and he feels like he's hearing nothing, to some extent. Is he doing something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Are we not listening hard enough? Blah, blah, blah. Let's dig into all of that. The silence, the roller coaster of feelings, the mix of reason and faith, and how in the world we're supposed to figure out God's will when the stakes feel so high. And where I want to start is here. What do we do when we pray, and yet it seems that all we're getting is silence? Is that normal, or are we doing something wrong?
Well, you're going to have to listen to the clock. That's one of the things in here.
Is that a sign? Is that God telling me something?
Yeah, that must be the sign. That's part of the new office. Well, I think the first thing is prayer is at the heart of it. I mean, obviously we have to start there. You have to be a person of prayer, and you have to be a person of regular prayer. It can't just be like on occasion. I don't think that one needs to every single day of the week in prayer say, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I mean, I think at a certain point we put it in God's hands and say, I will wait for your response. Okay. Now, the interesting part of the waiting for the response, let's remember, when God speaks, for the most part, it tends to be a very quiet whisper. Okay. It's not like a booming voice. It's not going to be, 2x4, unless basically you ask the Lord to hit you with the 2x4. And then, maybe he'll do it that way.
Maybe, right.
Maybe he'll do it that way. But I think the other piece is learning to hear God's voice when it is coming to you. Okay. And what I'm saying is God speaks to us through situations and people, other people. So when someone says to us, I really like a good example for your son. I say to him, I really think you should go to the seminary. That would be what I think you've got, your heart is there. I see it. I see the joy it brings you to do this, that, and the other thing. The problem is is he taking what I'm saying as part of God speaking to him? Or is he just saying, well, okay, I'm waiting for God to tell me that?
No, well, that makes sense.
Excuse me, but God just told you that through me. That's an example of it. Okay. I think the other piece is that we have to say to ourselves, okay, I am going to rest in the decision that, like I'm going to go forward with marriage to this person. And I think you have to sit with that and let that, what is your heart's response to that? Not when you're like on a high, but just throughout the day. Is this bringing you joy? Is this bringing you peace? Is this bringing you a sense of well-being? Or is it creating turmoil, stress, things like that are negative? God is, if it's of God, it's going to be something positive, okay? If it's not of God, it's not going to be positive, okay? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess what I think about that is that so often, I talked about the emotions, the roller coaster of feelings and all of that, I got a lot of things cooking. I was in a marriage. It lasted 20 years. I got an annulment from the church. I don't want to make a mistake again. So there's a lot of added stress, in my situation, in Andrew's
Yeah.
situation, he's thinking about school. So sometimes I don't know that I trust my feelings all
Well,
the time.
I think, okay, well, I think that is fair, okay, but I guess one of the things that I always say to people, are you rushing at this? Are you putting too much pressure on that you've got to make a decision and you should let it all just kind of simmer, like a pot on the stove, and just let it go and see what happens, stirring occasionally. And that, to me, it's got to be something over time, okay? The hardest part of relationships is any relationship perfect? No, it's not. Okay, that's the first thing. Is any relationship easy? It is not. It's going to take effort and work, and you're going to have times you're going to have to work through, various things that you think to yourself like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have gotten married because this isn't as easy as I thought it was. Well, nothing good is ever easy. So that's that. I think that's the main thing. But I question, if the person is meeting all the, so to speak, parameters that you've put in place in your heart and mind for what you're looking for in a spouse, in a relationship, then, at that point, then you have to say, I'm going to go with what my gut, not my heart, my gut is telling me.
The gut and the heart. Help me see how you're differentiating.
The gut, okay, I say the gut is that place where it's like, in the deep down part of me, I forget the emotions, forget the, the up and down. Like in my gut, what do I think I need to do? I think God is at our gut, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay.
God is like in that deep place, not the heart that's going, oh, I get so excited. I'm having so much fun. And the heart is fickle. The heart is fickle. The gut is the one that tells us, to whom else should I go, Lord, except for you? And if God is at the heart of all of this, I'm trying to serve God with all my being, even in this relationship, then, that to me is another aspect of like that person is meant for me. I do think that there's something to be said for not rushing, though.
Well, I like that, because I do think,
I think people get too, especially adults, by the way. When I say adults, like people your age who are in their second relationship, often having gone through a divorce, blah, blah, blah. They finally meet someone that they connect with emotionally. And they just, it's at high speed. You're on a high speed bullet train. Instead of letting it happen over time, that there's no rush here.
No, that completely makes sense. I didn't talk about her before. I met her around before Christmas time. So we've known each other for a fair amount of time, and we're just kind of talking things through. And I do think that there's this feeling of pressure that we put on ourselves with almost every decision, that we've got to we want to get out of this wavering area and get onto solid ground. At least that's me. I'm tired
Yeah.
of being in so let's just make that decision. But I do like
Well,
what you're saying with there's
well,
no point rushing.
why can't you just be in a relationship with this person that is significant to you, but we're not like stressing about the next step.
Right. And that makes,
Like if the next step is meant to happen, it will just happen naturally.
and I get that. That makes sense in certain decisions. There's certain decisions like that could go on indefinitely. Talk about a kid who's trying to decide what to do in college, what to do after college. There is, it's not a self-imposed time frame.
No, it's not. But
it's
I
a
think
literal time frame.
that's when you look at, like, you have to then also, as part of discernment, start to say, what is it I like to do? What is it that brings me joy? Where do I think that I'm going to most be myself, not just me as a person, but me as a faith person, So all of that, has to kind of be a part of the decision making, okay? And I think the other thing that's interesting is I think we have to have, for me, my spiritual director becomes a person that, as I'm talking about it, I'm saying, you tell me what you're hearing that I'm not saying out loud. What are you hearing in between? Mm-hmm. Or where am I like super excited and I don't even realize that that's what's really calling me? So I think you have to have somebody who can listen to you, help to sort through your garbage, and sort through the stuff and do it that way. So I mean, that would be the other thing that I would say. There's no, unfortunately, there is no surety till one gets going in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part of this. I mean, I remember in seminary, I said, I will stay till I just know that I need to go. Now, I figured that knowing that I needed to go was either going to be my decision, my heart, my gut, or I was going to be told, get your butt out of here. You do not belong here. I was kind of hoping that was what it would be, because then it would take the burden off me.
Right. Somebody else made that call.
Somebody else is going to make that call. But ultimately, what I kept saying to myself is, I'm here another year and I'm not feeling I should go anyplace else. Now, you can't do that with a marriage, obviously. You can't say, like, I'm in it till I'm out of it kind of idea. Mm-hmm. But I think that with a relationship is this person checking all the boxes of me being my best self? Me being the person I am called to be. Meaning God-loving, God-fearing, all those things. As a person, help me grow in that way in discipleship, because that's the other thing. If that person is going to be a roadblock to certain things, then they're not the right person, probably.
No,
I mean, to some extent, that's what you've said about your previous marriage, that it reached that point because you two were in two different places.
In regards to faith, yeah.
And that became a roadblock because you weren't going to be able to help each other get to the kingdom.
No, it was really a sad, situation, the way that all shook out.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not blaming her. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying that was the reality.
Exactly.
That was the reality.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's also, you have to go to people you really trust and say, what do you think of this person for me? And people, you have to ask a person who isn't trying to make you happy.
Or who's trying to who thinks they've got a better situation or a better handle on something sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be somebody who's kind of objective.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Somebody who you trust is more objective about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they haven't got a horse in the race.
No, and that's been my mistake. Not necessarily with this, but in other things. I talk to too many people that have a horse in the race, and that
you don't want to do that.
Everything. Yeah,
it does cloud everything. So I think that's why we have to have that friend who can tell us what we don't want to hear, but knows that our friendship is perfectly safe.
No, I was just talking to one of those friends. I didn't even realize it till you just said it, just the other day. He's somebody who, I work with him, but he'll say what he wants to say, what he needs to say, what he thinks he needs to say. And I don't always love it. I mean, we've butted heads on things before, but I really appreciate the fact that he will just give it to me. And when he tells me something, I don't go home and think, oh, was he just blowing smoke to make, I never think that. I always know that I got his true take on it. Whether he's right or wrong, I don't know that, but I do know that I'm getting his true take on a situation.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking at it and saying, from my perspective, this is what you should be concerned.
Yeah, that's incredibly valuable to have.
So, I mean, like, you know, would I think you should listen to your parents with a grain of salt? Should you listen to your kids with a huge grain of salt? But I'm just saying, like, you have to have that person that they're with you on the journey, and they know your heart, they know your mind, they know your desires, and they're not concerned about choosing to keep you happy when they respond.
Find that person. That's incredibly
You have
valuable.
to find that person. And I think, the other pieces in prayer, we've got to say, God, who today was the lifeboat you sent my way to get me off the roof of the house that's been surrounded by water?
Right.
And like, help me to ask very specifically, like, help me to see who was trying to help me today.
Who was speaking the message that we were praying for today?
Not just what I want to hear, but who's speaking your message.
God's message. That's what I meant. Yes.
And so, because I think that's where we tend to, I know a lot of people who are really only happy when God's message is what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the times that God is speaking to them when they're not hearing what they want, they just don't listen. I just choose not to listen to it. So, because I don't believe God is saying yes 1 minute and no the next minute.
Right. He's not schizophrenic.
God is always saying one thing to us: yes or no. So you have to be careful to say, is this God, or is this me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we do have to ask that. But how is it most consistent with who I believe has been God throughout all this?
No, I like that. I like thinking back, there is something that you said a little bit ago that I really think is really, really smart. Is that, God, not that anything else you said was not smart. Everything, sheer brilliance. But, you talked about how, we pray and we're waiting to hear from God. And sometimes, I think even the best of us convince ourselves that there's going to be a voice or a passage of the Bible. That's always my thing. I'll open something up and something will speak to me. And then you pointed out, it's sometimes the people in our lives. God's speaking through those people. God's going to choose that. And that makes perfect sense. Okay, let's start listening better. You talked about the friend, that person who's doesn't have a horse in the race. That can be God speaking. Not necessarily, but it can be as we start to compile all these things. The third thing that I thought was really, really smart that I had not thought about before was that God, you were saying, look at yourself, like you were talking about my kid in school. What do you like to do? What really gets you excited? What, all these things, that's who we are. God made us that way. He's not going to lead us into a future that's completely divorced from who he made us to be. So listening to that is actually, to some extent, listening to how God made us, and that will give us clues towards the direction we're called
and
to.
Being very aware of when we are at our best.
Yes.
If we're not at our best with that person we're dating, if we're not telling them things we should tell them, we're trying to just keep it all happy and nice, and that is not the right person then. Because that's not reality.
No.
That is not reality. And if you can't tell your, significant other that, no, absolutely not. I do not like blank, 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 whatever it may be. And I don't care that you like it. I don't like it. You know? So what are we going to do about this? Because I find that too many people in relationships play games in their relationship and then get married and go, well, why isn't this working? Because suddenly then they quit playing the games.
Yeah.
Well, one should be themselves completely from well, you're not going to be at the beginning, because no matter who people are, in the beginning of a relationship, they always played this game of trying to be the best person they could possibly be. I think that's one of the reasons why I always believe that relationships need to go on for quite a while, because you need to go through a lot of seasons with that person so that you know exactly who they are in all the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
All the seasons of life, it can't just be one experience.
No, I know in this situation that I'm in, it's been very strange because all the things you're saying are things that I don't want to do. I don't want to do that. Let's fake it for a while and just have fun. We have been like, has felt like we both talked about this, that it's been a pressure cooker because we have jumped in right from the get-go. Here's what I am. Here's what I've done that I don't think I'm very happy with. You just decide right away if you hate this and you can't handle it. And it's been really not fun. Fun's the wrong word. It's been very profitable in the sense.
And
freeing because all of a sudden, like, I don't know, 3 months in, I think I'm sure there are things that I'll come up with that, I want to confide this in because this is something they should know about me. I don't know what those are right now. I've gone through all the major things that I would be embarrassed to share. They're shared. They're forgiven. They're thought about. They're understood. And it's freeing. It's really tough. Some of the stuff that we've done that we don't agree on everything. And what I've found that's been so profoundly interesting about this relationship is that we've been able to talk very, very calmly about these differences and throw them out there. And we don't always come to an agreement, really, but I understand where she's coming from. She understands where I'm coming from. And then we can adapt to better when I say this or say that, this is how she's going to hear that. So maybe I can say it a different way. That's been really good. And one of the other things that I've really enjoyed about this is, like you mentioned at the beginning, is this taking me to a better place or is this a roadblock to, I can see that it's taking me towards a better place. It is not an easy journey. I mean, oh my goodness, in the last 8 months, whatever year, how long, 8 months, I've seen so much of me that I thought was okay, and it's not vile, but man, it's like, wow, these things that I thought I was doing okay on, there's a lot of work to do yet. And that's been, honestly, as sad as that sometimes is when we see all this, it's also really positive and exciting because you feel like God's, sometimes I feel like I can't speak to other people. I feel like I've been stagnant, like you've reached a point and you feel like, okay, this is where I'm going to be. And all of a sudden it feels like God's come through with a snowplow or a big plow and he's just moving dirt all over the place. And like, wow, there's a lot of room to grow again. And I've got a drive to grow because somebody's here helping me. So all of those things, like you're saying, rather than sit here and wait for, that was a terrible sound. That's not what angels sound like, folks. That's what maybe the other half of things sounds like. But, to see the clouds part and hear the angels sing, and now God's delivered me, the words. I've got to pay attention to all of this stuff, how my relationship is working out, my friends, what's in my heart.
I mean, I think that, it's just, we want answers way too quickly. That's part of the problem. I mean, granted, I understand when one leaves, when one is leaving college and trying to figure out what to do with their life, that can be very like, oh, I feel like you got pressure on you. But, nobody says you're going to keep that job for all your life. Short of unless you get ordained to priesthood, and then you don't have a choice. It's like marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got time leading up to that, where I think like jobs today, you can do that for a while and then go do something else. If that's, it doesn't have to be so written in stone.
No, there's a lot of societal, not necessarily even pressure, but just the way we think is that, like even, and going back to what do I like to do? What do I, you know, sometimes my kid will trump that, I believe, because I did in school. I'll get rid of what I want to do. I got to come up with something that's a moneymaker, that's a job that people will respect. Right.
No, no,
No,
no.
I know that, but that's what our brains tell us because that's what we're immersed in so much. And
Well, I think we have to find what brings us contentment.
right.
That thing that you say to yourself, yeah, I'm in the, I think often I say to people, priesthood is not, for me, my life, my vocation, is not every day sunshine and roses. It is not every day that I go, gosh, this is the best day again, and I'm thinking, but what has got to be there for me is that even in a awful day, I know I would want to be no other place than where I am. So I think that is what real contentment is about. It doesn't mean that life is going perfectly. It just means that when I am, even in the worst of moments, I'm still content that this is where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is where God wants me.
No,
So
that's really good. That's relationships. I mean, all of these decisions,
yeah.
that is
So
another thing to think about.
Yeah, I think that is what, when I look at discernment over my lifetime, some of it sometimes was saying, I'm here until I'm told I'm not supposed to be here. And then I'll have to figure out where there is going to be, or the new here. And sometimes you just have to recommit every day and say, I'm here. This is where I'm meant to be. So until I get dragged out of this here to some there,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna live in this moment, this place.
I think that's really, really effective for lots of decisions. Marriage isn't, like you mentioned earlier, it's not that way. Once you're in, you're in. But I do believe,
Yeah.
God's grace that's the whole point of that sacrament, is the grace comes to help us through some of these tough times.
I do think vocation is a different
Mm-hmm.
beast
Yes.
than, say, relationships or jobs or,
right.
Friendships or, I think, yes, once we make the promise to that vocation,
that's different.
We're committed to that come hell or high water.
Yes. And that's what came across. That's what I'm hearing when you're talking.
Yeah. And so I get it. But, I think the part of the problem is we're just trying too hard sometimes too.
Well, I think there's that, and I think there's also
try too hard.
This idea that, I don't know how other people think, but there's an idea that there's God's perfect person that he found for me, or God's perfect plan that he's found for me. And I've believed that throughout all of my life, just because that's not even because I thought about it. It's just kind of been overlaid on top of my brain. And now I challenge a lot of that because I think God's, he's working with what we choose, and he can, I guess, how do I even ask this? How big of a fear is there? And there is with certain ways of taking this decision, but can I mess up God's plan? I certainly don't believe I can mess up God's plan irrevocably.
No,
he'll always work through.
You know what? I think the problem is we have this idea that God's plan is set in stone. That God's plan is this and only this, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have to find that written in stone plan. And then we are completely in God's will. I think the problem with that is I don't believe that God's will changes in a sense that, but it adapts to choices we make, as long as those choices are still within the context of godly holiness, all those kinds of things. If it's not godly or holy, then yeah, it's not God's plan, but God's plan isn't, I think it has, how do I want to put it? It's almost like the never-ending story idea. You're just choosing another route. It doesn't mean that it's bad.
Now, when I was talking about, people are listening, and I don't usually share the video. We see each other, but I don't share that. when I was talking about a perfect person, that God's got this person, you're shaking your head violently. Talk about that just briefly a minute.
Well, first off, I don't believe there is our
soulmate.
Soulmate, yeah. There's a Hebrew word, and I can't think of it right now. Bashert, our bashert, that person that is, we're only meant to be with them, and we've got to seek till we find that person.
That's what the Hallmark Channel tells us, Father.
Yeah, Ron. And this idea that there is only one of those, and well, if that's the case, my God, wouldn't we have to travel the world in a certain point in our life to make sure that we take into account every possibility?
I do think that that's part of, maybe a small part of our problem with all of the failed marriages. But yes, I think we constantly are telling ourselves the minute we hit a rocky spot, maybe I hadn't found the right one.
Yeah.
And what a lot of stress to feel like I got to find this right person. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, and the problem is I don't know that there is that exactly right person. The only thing I can say that we should find is somebody that is willing with us and we are willing with them to deal with things that are not going to be easy.
Yeah, find somebody that you can work these
somebody
things through
that
with.
You can work the things through. Now, the interesting part is who you are right now in your relationship is not going to be who you are 10 years from now.
Right.
That's true for this woman as well. And I think that that's what we forget is we're constantly growing too. Are we growing together? Or are we growing apart? That's the other problem, and when we start to see that we're growing apart, I think that's when we need to need to reconnect and say, okay, this is not good. Why is this happening? And yeah, we have to, there's going to have to be adaptations made, but there's always forks in the road. We're choosing left or we're choosing right. Left and right one isn't good and one is bad. They're both can be goods. They're both of God. It's just that then God is going to say, well, which way do you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the hard part is I think we would be happier if we were robots.
Where we're just kind of programmed and
that we were programmed, God programs us and we just go in one direction that he's programmed. We're not robots. We get to make choice. And sometimes those choices are not a good versus an evil. They're two goods. Neither of them is bad.
No, I think as long as we're seeking God's plan and we're following to the best of our ability to hear what he's saying, to seek what he wants, I think I can't imagine he's going to work with us. I mean, he's worked with us even when we chose to, Adam and Eve in the garden, all the sin that we created, he still chose to work with us, even though we moved outside of his plan. He's always intervening to try to bring us back in line. It's not like, oh, I just made this decision and now the rest of my life has just been train wrecked. I've chosen the wrong school or the wrong this. Well, now, some of those are huge decisions to make.
I've had people say to me, Father, if God wants me to be a priest and I don't choose that, am I going to hell? Or, I'm like, no, God is allowing you to choose between two goods. Neither of them is bad. He may desire you to choose priesthood because that is going to be the easiest means for you to find holiness, or the one that is most in, of his mind for you and your heart. But it doesn't mean that if you say no to that you're a bad person. You've just made a choice is all, Mm-hmm. I think that's we want God to be like, we are happier when God is mean, vengeful, wrathful.
We're
for
happier?
Some reason, I think we would prefer that be the case in our minds, because then it makes a clear yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not. It's gray. A lot of life is gray, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't black or white. It's gray. And in the gray, we have to keep moving toward the white. but we're moving to the light.
No,
Yeah,
I know what you're saying 100% because yes, this has all been in my head over the last 8 months or a year or so, thinking this through. Is that I did want, God to have. I got to find this right person. I got to choose this right career, and that seemed like a really good, okay, then I'm on a track. I can't get off that track. I'm like a little Hot Wheels car on one of those tracks. It's just stuck on the track. That sounds good. Until I start to realize, wait a minute, there's so much stress to find the right, the perfect this and the perfect, like one single person or the one single job. And now I love the idea that, you know what, if I'm following and I'm listening as hard as I can, even if I mess that up, God's not sitting here saying, well, sorry about that. Looks like you just messed up. I'm going to go somewhere else. When my kids don't do the right thing, I'm still there to try
yeah.
to
You
help
don't
them
go.
land on their feet and let's just keep moving.
You
That's
don't
what
look at
God's
them
going to
and
do.
say, "Sucks for you."
Right. Right. God is not going to leave us there. And if he's
No.
got this really strong, vision for us, if we're listening, he's going to show us in one way or another.
Exactly. And we're gonna know without any doubt that that's where we're meant to be. I mean, I often tell my vocation story to people because, yeah, for me, I kept not listening to God. I kept not listening. And I kept saying to God, God, you have to tell me what to do because I'm at a wit's end. What choice to make about my life, Um, and yeah, God hit me upside the head with a 2x4. But I want to, I say the 2x4, it was just a very profound experience of knowing that what I was seeing, hearing, and feeling was what God wanted of me.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why then when I even took a year off from seminary, it was painful because it's like, well, I'm not doing what God wanted of me. But all the reasons why I wasn't doing what God wanted of me at that moment were legitimate. They were legitimate, and there were things that had to be worked through.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, I often say, I think that if God really wants something for you, it's going to happen somehow.
Well, I know that for me, entering the Catholic Church, that is one of those times, that I can look back and say, it's like what you just described, the 2x4 to the head kind of a thing. None of it made sense. I knew I didn't know the ramifications. I didn't know how dire things potentially could get and where things would go in my marriage and all of that. And not that that was strictly because of the Catholic Church, but that was a big chunk of it from what I understand. But still, my family was disappointed with me, my mom and my extended family. My kids kind of rode along with it and they love it now. But oh my goodness, I stepped out into something that made no sense. I was going places that nobody around me was. And yet I could not shake the idea that this literally is God telling me. And I, played with the idea for almost 4 or 5 years. I look back through emails where I would start an RCIA and then quit it because it was just, and finally I got to the point where I had a conversation with my wife at the time and I said, I have no doubt that God is calling me to go. And whether I go alone or go with everybody, I can't wait anymore. I've gone from doing my due diligence to now I'm kind of being disobedient. Is what I felt like by not taking that step. It's time. I've got to move.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what God's plan is. I don't know why this was a thing. I mean, I feel like I'm in the true faith and I'm very pleased to be here. I don't know where this all shakes out, but it was one of those things that, logic, reason in some regard told me this isn't the right path. Emotions told me, but maybe my gut, I don't know what exactly
Yeah,
convinced me.
you had to be listening at a very deep place that had nothing to do with all the turmoil around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people think, whenever I say, oh, you got to listen to your gut, I think we know that place. And we know that place is not just us. That place is where God is, where we're most ourselves, where we're, and when we listen to that place, it doesn't matter that there could be warfare going on around us, but we would be at peace. would just be like, I'm where I'm supposed to be. And so, and I think that's what makes saints, by the way.
Yeah.
They are able to just reside in that place no matter what. It's the Maximilian Kolbes who can be in the midst of a concentration camp, who can, everything looks like, excuse my expression, but looks like shit. And yet you say, you know what? God is here. I know he's here.
Well, there's so much peace finding God's will. And I think, when we found it and we're in it, like certain situations, we know we're in it and there's peace. That's what the saints lived, and it's not necessarily finding God's will doesn't mean we're pleased about the situation or the surroundings because of the surroundings. Maximilian Kolbe, he's not pleased because of where he's at. He's pleased because he's where God wants him to be right now. He's happy to be in God's will.
And he knows that God is there with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just part of all of this. So as I'm listening, it's trust, it's prayer, it's acting in faith, and it's a step-by-step thing. It's just riding this out, always being listening.
Moving in a direction until that direction can't be moved in anymore.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say? Any last final words of encouragement before we sign off for another week?
Go with God.
Go with God. All right. I think we've done as much as we can with the time that we got today. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you've ever felt stuck wondering what God wants for your life, I hope that today's conversation and the back and forth gave you some peace, maybe even some practical ways to keep moving forward and just searching for God's will. Remember, God's will isn't always this big lightning bolt, parting of the heavens and all of that. It's often revealed in living step by step. The people that surround us, the people that we talk to, the feeling that we've got in our gut leading us. If you did enjoy the episode and if you feel so inclined, please consider sharing the show with a friend, and also consider subscribing to the podcast wherever you listen. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Subscribe, leave us a review. We'd love that. All right, until next time, I'm Dan Hansen.
I'm Father Ron Hutchinson. God bless.
Thanks for listening to Intentionally Catholic. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing our show with a friend. If you have comments, questions, or topics you'd like to hear discussed, please email those to comments@icatholic.show. And be sure to tune in next time for another episode.